I don't want to create a panic or histrionics or something. We must be concerned about those things. We as Americans would feel inappropriately accused. There's a political extreme nature. I think that the economy will probably be pretty good next year. Economies go up and down and rebounds happen. But there's an evolution that's taking place, and there was almost a defining moment in 2020. The evolution is that there are three big forces that are underway. That is the wealth, values gap, and political gap, which has big implications for policies, how to divide the pie and so on, left and right, big issue. The second factor, all three of these have not existed in these degrees since the 30s. The second factor is the production of debt and money by central banks, the hitting of zero interest rates, the need to produce a lot of debt, and with that debt, the central bank printing the money and buying that debt. That has not happened in this degree since the 30s, and it's a big thing. It has to do with the value of money. And the third big thing is the changing world order. And by that I mean the rise of a great power to challenge the existing great power, the United States. We began a world order in 1945, New World Order, American World Order, and now China is rising, and that competition is an important factor. Those three things together will be with us as we rebound. The virus was a stress test, and it differentiated countries, it differentiated companies. And so we're coming into that in a very different kind of way with those factors remaining. I don't think that there is a plan for dealing with productivity. If you want to raise your living standards as a country, it's like raising your living standards as individuals or companies. You have to sell more than you spend, and you have to take that savings and build a good balance sheet. And you have to employ people productively. If we don't have broad productivity and employment, which comes from education and jobs programs and such, then we're going to have a continuation of the worsening, the greater polarity, and I think that that'll be a problem. So yes, that's something that has to be dealt with. History has taught us these things. I've studied the last 500 years of history in cycles, and these things repeat over and over again. Large wealth gaps with large values gaps at the same time as there's a lot of debt and there's an economic downturn produces conflict and vulnerability, and that will be with us unless the economy is good for most people. Most people could be productive and effective and benefit. I think that the most important thing for the country is bringing the population together because the conflict is our biggest issue. And then together in a bipartisan way to deal in also the smart engineering way of dealing with productivity, making most people productive and operating where they're productive, and that it's more inclusive. History has shown that when you get to this stage, and our circumstances today also reflect that in the degree that there's this kind of conflict. If you look at the map, the election map, and you see red and blue, but you also don't see how red the red is and how blue the blue is. In order to bring the country together and not have a form of civil war, where there's movement, we're seeing the form of civil war. People are leaving to go from one place to another, partially for taxes, but also partially for other reasons. There has to be the bringing of the country together, but in a smart way, that there's not just the giving of money and where it's needed, and it is needed in places, but the emphasis on productivity. Things that I don't see much about is education, infrastructure, and those things, and I think those are important. I think if one reads history, one recognizes that some of the things that we've gotten used to in our lifetime, which is peace, harmony, productivity, those kinds of things, you cannot take for granted that you couldn't have circumstances that cause revolutionary changes, create a hyper worry. I don't want to create a panic or histrionics or something. I would look to this and I would say, are you worried about our conflicts that we're having internally? We must be concerned about those things, particularly if the financial condition through the amount of creation of debt and money is a reality. So I'm not trying to scare people. I'm trying to direct the intentions and ask the questions. Yeah. Shouldn't we work on these things together? Aren't you concerned about that conflict and some of these things? That's what I'm trying to bring forward, because I think it's pretty obvious, right? But I think that when faced with choices like exist now, that maybe the alternative is worse. And by being aware of the worse alternative, that might help. Well, the worst alternative is one side or another says, this isn't my country anymore. This isn't my population. That when the cause that people are behind is more important than the means of resolving their disagreements, that's a threatening situation. There's a political extreme nature. The way the parties work is that it's inclined to pull it in one direction or pull it in the other direction, and so the extremities are increasing. History has shown that there's no place for moderates in those places, those times. That it's a time when people say you have to be on one side or the other, and the extremities and the war, the conflicts become greater. You don't want to create a tax rate that undermines productivity, or it's a complicated question, because as you raise that tax, you want to do it in a smart way that also doesn't drive money into the wrong things, and so it's a complicated engineering question. But you have to raise productivity, and then it's really what you're spending it on so that it raises productivity. So something like education, particularly where you get the big bang for the buck along those lines, those basics, I think there's no good reason that shouldn't happen. So it's both of those. I can't off the moment tell you what that would be, but it has to be well engineered. It's got to be more.